Well, welcome everyone to this session of Animal Speak, Empathy with Nature. Everyone here, everyone there in the Zoom land, Facebook Live, and people out there on the Vision Train. A warm welcome to all. And we're going to begin as usual with some serene music, followed by a guided Animal Speak meditation. You find yourself in a jungle. In a jungle. You're alone, but you feel okay about being alone. There's a presence to the jungle. And you know enough that if you're following your path, you're going to be okay, even in a jungle. You feel safe. You feel protected, even in this unfamiliar place, the wildness of a jungle. And it's nighttime as well. So you're really needing to follow your instincts, to follow the direction you feel called to take in this jungle. And you feel courage. You feel courage growing in your heart. Your heart feels calm and steady. And your breath feels calm and steady. You recognize there's no need to fear. Fear would not serve you here. So you feel courage. Courage instead of fear. As you know, courage will serve you as you tread into this unfamiliar territory of the jungle. There's lots of jungle sounds around. Some grunts coming from different directions. Some night bird sounds. Some birds calling out to let you know they are there because they know you're there. And this helps you to orient to the space as you make your way in the dark of this jungle. There's not much light to guide you, only a little bit of moonlight. But there's a steady buzz of peepers in the background, and this is helping you to hear your way. And the foliage of the jungle brushes against you as you move forward. It feels nice against your skin, the leaves, the vines. Moving forward slowly, you suddenly hear the sound of a low growl. A growl of an animal somewhere in the jungle nearby. And you stop and you listen. Stop waiting. But there's nothing. No more growls. So you start to move forward again, staying calm and courageous in your heart. Your breathing steady. Just listening to the sounds of the jungle. Listening intently for any new sounds. And as you move forward, feeling the leaves on each side where you're walking, again you hear a low growl. Really more like a purr. And this time when you stop, you do hear something moving in the jungle, moving towards you. The sound is getting more distinct as you hear it brushing through the jungle foliage. And you just stand still, calm, and at peace, because you're certain this is where you're meant to be right now. So you just stand in your courage. The sound of something crawling through the jungle brush in the dark grows louder. It's moving right toward you. And it feels like whatever it is, it's coming toward you on purpose. that a meeting is about to take place. So you just wait calmly and in quiet, waiting to see what emerges from the jungle foliage. Then you see it, or at least you see two eyes coming toward you in the dark, two shining eyes, and they continue to come closer, right in your direction, these two eyes, and then a faint outline, a silhouette you can see in the dim moonlight. You can't tell exactly what it is, but it lets out a sound, a call, like a large mew. It's some sort of cat, a wild cat, a large feline. And it is clear it's coming directly toward you, eyes shining with a steady, intent gaze. Then it stops. It stops right in front of you in the dark of the jungle night. You feel no fear. You actually feel nothing threatening from what you see, what you sense in the silhouette outline of this animal. Then the animal lets out another cry, and you can see long teeth in the mouth in the moonlight. After it's finished this cry, it then sits. And you're sitting too, both in silence. The two of you eye-gazing with each other. You can still see its eyes, and it's obvious it can see your eyes. And you realize it has something to share with you, something to pass to you, some sort of message or vision for you to receive. It doesn't necessarily speak it, just gazes directly into your eyes in something of a hypnotic way. And you realize this being is sending you something through its eyes, its steady gaze. And so you're just calmly continuing with the gaze, trusting this deep moment with nature. That's a gift for you. This face-to-face moment, this wild cat. You drink in what it's sending you, the dreamscape, in silence, just letting it fill you. And then you feel filled by what this creature has projected into you. You feel filled in your being by what you've received. You hold it with gratitude. And then you sense that it is finished. And you nod to this being in the dark for what vision it has given to you. And you see the silhouette nod back to you and blink its eyes, shining eyes in the darkness. And then you watch it turn, and with one great leap, flies into the air and disappears back into the jungle from where it came. And you feel it's time for you to do the same. So you turn and begin walking in the jungle in the direction you came from. You pass through the jungle foliage again. You can see the way you came. You follow that. You feel the freshness of the jungle night, as well as invigorated by what you received. You move through the jungle again with no fear, no nervousness, but rather a lot bolder from this encounter. And you feel yourself returning to the here and now. Feel yourself becoming aware of your body again. Each breath bringing you back to an awareness of your senses. Bringing you back with this new infusion, new vision, new sense of self. And when you're ready, letting your eyes open and take some moments to draw and journal what you received in this jungle vision. Secure this vision within your mind. Just enjoy being artistic, playing with the image, playing with the message, being creative. Well, you will recall that in the previous sessions, we looked at the bird as the representative of the head and nerve sense system. And we looked at the bovine representing the opposite pole, the powers of the metabolic and limb system. In the air, the bird reminds us of our thoughts, our thinking processes, and sense of levity. Very connected to the weight of gravity stands the cow, the bovine, the ungulates. And it reminds us of our digestive, our metabolic capacities. So today, as you may have guessed, to round this out into a threefoldness, we have come to the mysterious middle realm. In the middle, between the weight of gravity and the lift of levity, is what we experience in the realm of felines, canines, carnivores of all kind, even your domesticated cat or dog, which are descended, of course, from lions and wolves. And these species of the world represent the middle realm, the heart and lungs, the circulatory and respiratory system. We sometimes use the expression about someone saying that they have the heart of a lion to indicate how they embody what a lion embodies of this middle realm. The lion has actually a short digestive tract because it eats raw meat, which puts only a light load on its circulation because it digests relatively quickly. So the lion really is much more balanced, much more centered in this center realm of the body. The lion has powerful limbs, like a bovine, but at the same time, it can spring up, unlike a bovine. Actually, more like a bird, leaping up into trees and such. Oh, did I say leap? I guess we'll have to do what Plato says, that every being can leap up in the air for no reason at all, except that it feels so good.
Leap.
So
leaping.
Good.
I'm also leaping. Yes.
Every sentient being has this instinct to leap up into the air for no reason at all, except that it feels good. And cats do that. Cats and even dogs like to leap up. They have that connection to the air, something over the bovine, but more similar to a bird. So the lion demonstrates this middle point, a balance between the two, and shows a balance between breathing and circulation. In the lion's chest, we see the quintessence of the rhythmic system. And apart from being at the top of the feeding chain, and sometimes referred to as the king of the beasts, Rudolf Steiner points to the balance and harmony embodied in these types of animals in their form. And I'll read a quote from a book of Rudolf Steiner's that is actually full of his spiritual insights into these matters. This book is called Harmony of the Creative Word, the Human Being and the Animal, Plant, and Mineral Kingdoms. It's very deep stuff. So he says, quote, "In lions, more than any other animal, the inner rhythms of breathing and heartbeat are in inner balance and harmony. This is why lions have that particular way of devouring their food, with unbridled voracity, literally gulping it down. They are simply glad to have got it down. They are ravenous for nourishment because it is a part of their nature that hunger causes them much more pain than it causes other animals. They are not interested in taste sensation. They are animals that find their satisfaction in the even rhythms of their breathing and circulation. It is only when they feel an inner balance between breathing and circulation that lions are really in their element. They are wholly lion when they experience the deep inner satisfaction of the blood beating upwards and of the breath pulsing downwards. Lions are in their element when these two wave movements come together." End of quote. If we look for the characteristics of the bird, in the human being we see the head. If we look for the characteristics of the cow in the human being, we see their entire organism seems designed for digestion. It points to our metabolic, even our reproductive and limb powers. But for the characteristics of the lion, we see the human chest, what is contained within the chest. And Steiner has drawn out for us the three human processes of thinking, feeling, and willing, and shown their relationship to the bodily processes occurring in the head, occurring in the breathing and circulation of the chest, and in the metabolism of the lower pole. Thinking, feeling, and willing. And we're seeing how that between the influences of the below, the earth, and the influences of the above, the cosmos, this threefoldness has emerged in the most diverse ways. In fact, one of the books I've been looking at lately, simply called Animals, or Encyclopedia of Animals, fascinating to see the diversity of forms that has emerged between Earth and cosmos. But an even more interesting book I have is one written by a spiritual scientist. As a matter of fact, it's not one book, it's two books, 2 volumes. Here's just one of the volumes, called Threefoldness in Humans and Mammals. And I've been gaining a lot of inspiration from this book, and I want to give credit to where credit is due. This is written by Wolfgang Schad. This is his research. And in this, as a scientist inspired by the work of Rudolf Steiner, he actually put out the original version back in the 1970s. And I was quite delighted when just last year, Mr. Schad, as an old man now in his 80s, along with the help of his son, put out this beautiful 2-volume set that now comes with hundreds of color photos and drawings of the animals he describes. So you can really look at the diversity of forms that have emerged here between Earth and the cosmos. And Wolfgang Schad speaks of how the 3 organ systems found in humans is found in the threefoldness of mammals, and is most vividly displayed in the differences between the rodents, the carnivores, and hoofed mammals or ungulates. Among the mammals, the 3 main systems relate to one another in very different ways, in that one or another system is especially well developed, as we'll see in a moment. They each have developed one of the systems to a higher degree of specialization. And one could say, in some ways, then animals are more physically developed than a human being. And that is part of the premise to the idea that the human came first. The human preceded the animals and then branched out into the animal world, where the animals continued to evolve and specialize with particular degrees in each of these 3 realms. So from the perspective of spiritual evolution, the general human archetype existed first, at least on a certain level of things. You could say the unmanifest level. And then the animals evolved out of this human archetype to express certain specialized characteristics and traits. In Darwinism, or better now called Neo-Darwinism, which is updated to include the understanding that genetics gives us, it is considered in Neo-Darwinism that form is the result of randomly acquired adaptations and survival responses to external stimuli. But what we're adding to this, in the view of a spiritual evolution, where things started in a unmanifest spiritual state, is that all organisms are also expressing something of an inner spiritual nature, not just responding to external stimuli and the need to survive, but they're actually expressing something of an inner spiritual nature. Something is coming from within, from the unmanifest realm into the manifest realm. And this sort of wisdom is central to the indigenous peoples, to their understanding of things, which they have based on their natural shamanistic state of consciousness. And you can see it in the artwork they do, and perhaps you have even seen this come through in you in the drawing from the inside out exercise, which was one of the animal speak assignments given over the past couple of weeks, and we're going to repeat again tonight. But to see how something comes from the center out, expressing itself towards the periphery, towards the environment. It could be responding to the environment, but there's something of an innate spiritual impulse that is being expressed that is of a much higher nature, you could say, than just a survival instinct. So I'm going to take a moment here to show some photographs as I've done the last couple of weeks. So first of all, we see this image of a tiger. This is a wild cat. Next to a little kitty, which is derived from the wild cat and been domesticated. Here is a lion, looking into the eyes of a lion, and this steady gaze that it has. You can see how lions have very strong eyesight. So that part of them in their head really leans them towards some of this idea of being eagle-eyed. We talked about the eagle being really more of a head being with its nerve sense system, and of course the eyes are very much directly an extension of the nerve sense system. So we speak of eagle eyes, but we see how the lion in the middle has something of that pull in itself. Here we have a lion with its canine teeth. We'll be talking about that in a moment, so I wanted to look into the dentition of a lion. Here we've got a wolf and a dog. And of course, dogs are derived from wolves, domesticated and bred to be house pets and whatnot, whereas the wolf maintains its nature in the wild. And here again is a wolf showing its dentition, its canine teeth, which we'll talk about in a moment. It also has the eagle eyes. It's a lion, very balanced in its form. You can see the strength of its limbs, which it shares with the ungulates, the bovines, the hoofed animals. Strong, powerful limbs, but it's not so connected to the earth as a cow. Stands in that middle balance between the cows and the birds. And while I'm at it, I'm going to show you one other thing I've got. I'm going to show you a video of my bathroom. How often you get to see a video of someone's bathroom. In a moment you'll see why. It's a wildcat. It's the skull of an anaconda. Some more wildcats. Animals all over the place. A lot of these are photographs I took myself, including that one. Leopard. Wolf. Giraffe. Polar bear. It's an animal as well up there. Lots of animals there in that collage from Costa Rica. Okay, So you got to see my bathroom. And even if you've never been here, you can say you've been to my bathroom. And how many people do you know who have turned their bathroom into a sanctuary for animals? I have. It's been like that for a few years, and I quite enjoy going to the bathroom. So back to this idea of how there is an inner nature and principle at work in the development of form, something coming from the inside. And what is that? That each organism is a piece of the intelligence of the cosmos at work and on display on Earth. Right? We're talking about the intelligence of the cosmos, looking at this book the last few weeks. And so this intelligence of the cosmos is mirrored upon the Earth, and in particular the living organisms displaying a certain aspect of the intelligence of the cosmos. And in that, the intelligence of the cosmos is threefold. That it has a thinking head aspect, you could say, just as a human has, a feeling heart aspect, and a metabolic will aspect. So let's have a little closer look at this threefoldness of the intelligence of the cosmos as expressed in the manifold variety of forms seen in the organisms of Earth. In Shad's work, he focuses particularly on the threefoldness as displayed in the rodents, carnivores, and ungulates, or the hoofed animals. We find that the mammals demonstrate the remarkable differences possible in the relationship between these three main organ systems. The bovine, with its mighty digestive processes and its prominent hoofed limbs, its whole organization is determined by the special qualities of the metabolic limb system. But mice, in contrast, in their nervous sensitivity, show the greatest possible contrast to the bovine nature. The mice's extremely refined sense organs dominate the other organs, the other organ systems, that we may characterize the mice and all rodents as primarily nerve sense animals. Then the carnivores, such as felines and canines, and cats and dogs, demonstrate a being that lives primarily in the balance of these two poles that are demonstrated by mice and bovines. We see them expressing more of the middle system in the processes of respiration and blood circulation. Furthermore, what is brought to a highly refined state of one-sided developments in animals seen in rodents or bovines or canines is shown to be in balance in the human. That these three different types of mammals show kind of a one-sidedness which is shown to be in balance in the human. So back to the point about how an animal is shaped by an adaptation to its outer context and external environment, but it's also expressing something of a characteristic of the cosmic intelligence. The head, the heart, the will, the thinking, the feeling, and the willing. The human form is then perhaps less shaped by the external environment, less shaped by survival mechanisms, and more so shaped to be a balanced expression, a direct expression of the macrocosmic universe. You could say that our carriage was not so determined by adaptations for survival, but from the very beginning was destined to become the carriage of the cosmos, the bearer of the cosmic intelligence. And in this explains why the human sometimes feels itself as a foreigner on Earth. that the human sometimes feels out of place in nature, on this plane of Earth that seems so natural to these other organisms, be it plants or animals. And so we see how at times we do not function well. We're not so adapted to the circumstances of Earth because of this cosmic nature. And I'll look more at this in the upcoming series that I have planned for the spring that will focus primarily on the human, and I'll talk about that more later. But let us continue to look at the threefoldness in animals. So as I said, or as Wolfgang Schad said in his wonderful 2-volume book, in rodents, the sense nerve functions predominate. And we can see their sensitivity to the environment, even their nervousness. Their nerve sense is seen clearly in their limbs as well. They have 4 fingers and a thumb, like the human. And they show some of the cleverness and ingenuity of humans. Whereas the anatomy of the hoofed mammals show a hypertrophy or extra development of the musculature of the limbs. And this stands in stark contrast to the finely developed fingers of a mouse, which even has nails. So the ungulates have taken the tiny mouse nails in the opposite direction and enlarged them into one great hoof. The hoof is really like a nail. One nail, one great big nail, whereas a mouse has tiny little nails on its 5 fingers. And this hoofness is where these mammals get their name. Ungulates means a hoofed animal. The rodents, things like the squirrels, for example, are very adept at grasping, handling, feeling things. Their limbs clearly have a sensory function. And their long facial hairs, their whiskers, also have a sensory function, very connected to the brain nerve system. Even the shorter hairs that cover the entire surface of their body, including their bushy tail, enables rodents to find their way in the external world. It's a form of communication with the external world through these fine hairs. Rodents must sleep often. In all animals, it's always the nerve sense system in the waking state that gets exhausted and needs to be restored by going into the unconsciousness of sleep. The organs of metabolism, on the other hand, they function outside of consciousness. They're never awake. The nerve sense system's awake and then needs sleep, whereas the metabolic system is never really awake. It's all unconscious activity. You can digest your pizza even after you've fallen asleep. So rodents in particular, because they're so active in their senses, require frequent periods of rest, even during the day. Whereas hoofed animals, the ungulates, in contrast, require very little deep sleep. Perhaps even only 1 or 2 hours is enough for cows, elephants, giraffes. In these metabolic animals, the processes that build up the body, the metabolic processes, predominate even during the waking state. Cows are digesting, doing metabolic activity even while awake. So these animals tire much less readily than do rodents. You can see a contented peacefulness and restfulness in a cow's placid gaze, especially when just ruminating for hours in this dreamy state. In fact, the eyes of all ruminants lack the yellow spot, the macula lutea, which is the part of the retina with clearest sight. So to the ruminants, the outside world appears very diffuse and dreamy. A cow is never as completely awake as a mouse, even in their half wakefulness. The digestive tract of ruminants is highly evolved. The intestines are extremely long, sometimes 20 times the length of its body. It's about 200 feet in length in a cow. And the substance of the grass, the leaves, and the straw is actually very poor nutrition and is extremely difficult to digest. It gets chewed twice, mixed with saliva, and fermented in the body. That's what it has to build up this extraordinarily powerful and large body, eating poor nutrition, but to a very high degree of digestion and processing. Conversely, rodents prefer high energy foods such as nuts and seeds. Their metabolism is relatively weaker, so it requires only easily digestible, energy-rich foods. And it's interesting how a squirrel or a chipmunk, for example, will take a nut, bury it in the earth, so that the earth can pre-digest it for it. It sits there through the fall and winter into the spring, being digested and broken down for it by the earth. Wonderful relationship it has there, symbiotic with the earth. Now in the middle stand the carnivores, who consume food that is most similar to their own body. Carnivores feed on protein, found in the meat and blood of their prey. This substance also requires powerful digestion, as with bovines, but the substance they're consuming is much closer to the carnivore's own body. The substance is therefore more easily assimilated than the cellulose is that nourishes the ungulates. It's interesting, there's an inverse relationship between the quality of the food ingested and the bodily size of the animal eating it. In mice, rich, nourishing food is taken up by the body that contains almost no fat deposits as energy reserves. The opposite is true of the ungulates. They take in relatively poor food and yet develop from it substantial fatty deposits, such as the ham in pigs, or the suet in cattle, or the humps in camels. Now, the felines and the canines stand in the middle in this regard, with a balanced amount of body fat. Not too much, not too little, kind of like Goldilocks, just right in the middle. The nutritive processes of the carnivores represents an intermediate processing. So when a leopard devours a gazelle, for example, a change of substance takes place during digestion, but is really just from one form of protein to another. Quite different than what you find in the rodents or the bovines. Let's talk about the mouth for a moment. The formation of the mouth is significant for understanding the morphology of mammals. Let us consider our own mouth. The most touch-sensitive part is the opening in the front, the surface of the lips, the tip of the tongue. Here the food is touched, it's examined, tasted, then bitten off with the incisors, the front teeth. So in the threefoldness of things, this could be considered the top or the head or the brain of the mouth here in the front. Next, the food is moved back into the middle of the mouth, or is chewed and circulated with saliva. This process is less conscious than what goes on at the front of the mouth. We can see that in a cow who uses its tongue to go out, feel the food, taste the food, tear it off and bring it in. In the middle region of the mouth, it's less conscious, which is the same with the middle region of our body, the rhythmic and circulatory system. This is something that's less conscious. It's not completely unconscious because we can control our breathing. This is what a lot of yoga is about, is taking control of this middle realm, which works on its own when we're not paying attention, we're sleeping at night, but during the day we can actually bring consciousness to this middle rhythmic circulatory system. back to the mouth, the food, once it's been circulated in the middle and chewed, is then moved to the posterior of the mouth, where there's pretty much an unconscious, involuntary act of swallowing it and passing it down into the unconscious part of our body, down into the metabolic regions where there's catabolic activity and anabolic, breaking down and building up. So there is a threefoldness, even in the oral cavity. The anterior conscious nerve sense pull, then the rhythmic chewing and tasting in the middle of the mouth, and then finally the least articulated part of the mouth with the soft palate and the throat area. So this takes us into a consideration of how the threefoldness in humans and animals is seen clearly also in the three types of teeth. The incisors of humans are in the front with narrow cutting edges. We have molars in the posterior, which are broad with these grinding surfaces. And in the middle, both in the middle in terms of position and shape, are the canine teeth with their rounded or conical shape, yet with pointed structure. The canines take a middle place between the incisors at the front and the molars at the back. This becomes revealing when looking at this threefold aspect of animals' teeth. The primarily sense-oriented rodents show a highly specialized development of the anterior incisors at the front. They have two long, gnawing teeth shaped like chisels in both the upper and lower jaws. Canine teeth are absent in rodents, and they have very few molars, typically in rodents. Now, in carnivores, such as cats and dogs, the canine teeth dominate and are often many times longer than the other teeth. We saw that with the photos of the lion and the wolf. The incisors are often rather small, and the incisors next to the canines are often even shaped like canines. The molars, with their pointed crowns, also take on some of the characteristics of the canines, the canine teeth in a canine animal. Both rodents and most ungulates lack canine teeth. The intermediate teeth form that is predominant in felines and canines. In contrast, the molars are particularly well developed, large, and numerous in the posterior oral cavities of ungulates, such as horses, pigs, rhinoceroses, hippos, camels, giraffes, deer, sheep, and bovines. In these animals, nerve, sense, and rhythmic systems are overshadowed by the forces of digestion, so that in a cow's upper jaw, for example, there are no incisors or canines at all. The cow uses its long tongue to grab and tear off the grass instead of using teeth. And then the grass goes straight into the chewing and grinding of the molars. So while looking at the mouth of mammals, we can see there's also a threefoldness in the jaw's principal motion in eating, the way the upper and lower teeth come together. In the rodents, the jaws move forward and backward with their large incisors. In the ungulates, the movement is more lateral, side to side, grinding the grass. And with the carnivores, this motion is entirely vertical, more of a chewing motion, up and down. And of course, in the human, we see the capacity for all three. This threefoldness is very much in balance. So with all this eating and consuming going on in animals, it's interesting to consider the size each form assumes. Every animal species occupies a more or less characteristic amount of space. The size of an animal is relatively fixed. Goethe touched upon this point in his osteological studies in 1795, where he said, quote, "The question arises, does size influence shape and form? and to what extent? At first sight, we might assume that it should be equally possible for a lion as for an elephant to attain a length of 20 feet. But experience shows us that a fully developed mammal does not exceed a certain size. So we take for granted the size of each organism. Each species tends to have a common size. Those dominated by the metabolic limb system, the ungulates, fill out large forms. Sense-oriented animals, the rodents, take up only a small space. And the representatives of this middle sphere, once again, occupy an intermediate position in terms of their size. Felines and canines have a medium-sized body relative to rodents and ungulates. And when we turn a look to the human, we see that the human form is not an extremist or specialist in any of these regards. The human brings all three extremes into balance. We see this in what we have just looked at, in the shape of the mouth, the types of teeth in our mouth, the motion of the jaws, and the size that we assume. The human stands in the middle, much in the same way as carnivores, but we are even less specialized than carnivores. You can see why there has been the development of a special relationship and domestication with the canines, the felines, into house pets as cats and dogs, because of this special relationship we have with them through this intermediateness, this balancedness, this middle realm, this heart realm, in fact. Perhaps it's through the heart connection that we have this special relationship with cats and dogs. So overall, the human is generally capable in a threefold manner. But animals demonstrate that they have evolved beyond what a human demonstrates in any of these departments. Animals have become specialized in specific ways. A human is a generalist. And out of this generalized form evolved the specialized world of animals. This is not to say that animals are more evolved than humans, but only that they evolved out of the human and beyond the human in particular directions. In this perspective of spiritual evolution, the threefoldness of the human existed before animals came into being. This archetypal form pre-existed animals in an unmanifest, non-physical level of existence. And we'll look more closely at this when we get to Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Human, which we'll look at in the next series, and how Da Vinci really saw this balance in the design of the human. He saw the intention of the cosmos to make a balanced physical carriage for itself, whereas animals demonstrate an imbalance or a one-sidedness or even lopsidedness of the archetypal three-foldedness. And this imbalance is something that the human has, or the balance is something that human has by nature in its physical carriage, but this is something we have to continue to work at in our spiritual or psycho-spiritual development. As I was pointing out in previous sessions, that we have moved from a right brain shamanistic type of consciousness, swung over now to much more left brain, analytical, logical type of consciousness. Neither side is in balance. And this left brain now is an imbalance that we have to be dealing with. It's part of what has given us this theory of evolution, this Darwinian notion that we have evolved out of animals, that we grew out of monkeys, and that this is taught in our schools as settled science. But this is a half-truth. This is not even a half-truth. This is, in some ways, an out-and-out lie to say that. It's really neglecting what our ancestors saw and knew through their shamanistic means of knowing and their natural connection to spiritual aspects of life, that the human is actually not just growing up out of the earth, but growing down out of the cosmos. And to deny that is really to cut off our connection from the intelligence of the cosmos, to deny really the core of our nature. And this is a bit of the downside of our modern Western science, that we perpetuate this kind of idea, saying that we can't prove that there's anything beyond the physical. But I would like to contend that just because you can't prove that spirit exists, you can't disprove that it exists. But there are ways to prove to yourself that it exists. And I'd like to bring up something I was promoting a few years ago when I came back from Peru and had gone there for a season to do some ayahuasca sits. And I thought, what a great idea to set up a Save a Scientist campaign. So I was promoting the idea that people would get together and pool some money, get together $2,000-$3,000, and they find some really left-brain, hard-boiled scientists who's completely cut off from anything spiritual, mystical, and so forth, and they give that money to the scientist so they can go down to the Amazon and drink of this brew, the ayahuasca brew, and have some mystical experiences that really activate the right side of the brain, the third eye, and just being there brings one into more of a shamanistic state because of the vibration there and the consciousness of the people there. And that would be a way to save a scientist from the devices of their own thinking. So I want to promote that idea again. Perhaps you would like to take that up with some friends to collect some funds to save a scientist. And if that's not going to work, I mean, there's also just being at home and working with art, using art, artistic activity to activate oneself, not just a consumer of art, not just listening to music or looking at art on a wall, but through artistic activity, to be a producer of art. This is a great way to activate and balance our capacities, not only the left and right hemisphere of the brain, but also the thinking, feeling, willing, the threefold nature of the soul, of our animagination. So to wind down this session, we're going to do again this drawing from the inside out, where we take a pencil, crayon, some colored pencil, and we start from a center point, and we start to move out from that to the periphery and see what emerges, see what form emerges. We don't have any predefined idea in mind, but as we flesh out, you could say, from the center point, we see what emerges, what we see with our imagination. And in this case, it may be something that's more head-like, might be more heart-like, might be more limb-like. So let's do that as we close this down, and before I give the animal speak assignment. Yeah, so if you get a piece of paper and some pencil crayon, join me for a bit here to enjoy some artistic activity and activation of the animagination. And some pencil crayon, join me for a bit here to enjoy some artistic activity and activation of the animagination. Once you get an idea of what is coming forth, you can always consciously add your own embellishments, flesh it out. Once you get an idea of what is coming forth, you can always consciously add your own embellishments, flesh it out. Oh, looks like I got 2 birds and a cat. And the cat is chasing the 2 birds. I'm not surprised how I get a lot of birds coming out. I definitely have something of a bird archetype. Second last session of this Empathy with Nature series, Animal Speak. So we have one more next week to round things out. Still going to land some big pieces to pull a lot of this together. But at this time, I also want to announce that there'll be a 3rd series in the Empathy with Nature series that will be focusing primarily on the human, but it will tie in aspects from the first series, Thinking Like a Plant, and then the second series, Animal Speak, and we'll see how the human fits within all of that, as well as questions around its human's cosmic nature, and even addressing questions around this coming idea of transhumanism, the merging of humans with technology. So that will be starting in the spring, in April. There'll be announcements sent out through email and whatnot. And I'll give exact dates at the session next week. So, Animal Speak assignment number 1. Spend time contemplating felines and canines, these representatives of the middle realm. See them outside or online, lots of pictures and videos online, and feel into the quality that these carnivores demonstrate and the balance they embody in comparison to birds and rodents or bovines and ungulates. And allow this sense of balance to speak to your own inner sense of movement. Number 2, repeat the animation exercise we just did, drawing an animal-like form from the inside out, moving from a center point with the pencil crayon, then gradually fleshing out a form. As a general form emerges, see if the specific gestures and features emerge, letting carnivore images play in you and through you this week. And when it feels like you've finished the drawing stage, close your eyes and reimagine what you drew, and let the image grow even further in its features and characteristics. Allow it to move within you with your imagination. See what comes, see what speaks to you in kind of a shamanistic journey with it. The third one, borrowing again from the desire exercise of Rudolf Steiner's book, How to Know Higher Worlds. Visualize an animal that has obtained something it has desired, and direct your attention to the sense of fulfillment of desire. Last week the exercise was looking upon an animal that did not yet have its desire fulfilled, but had the strong sense of desire. Now we want to focus on the sense of fulfillment of a desire, what that looks like, what that feels like. Surrender yourself to this picture and what you can observe in your memory. paying close attention to any feelings that the image awakens within you. You'll experience in yourself a feeling corresponding to the inner state of the animal, and will begin to notice that this feeling within you produces a force within you. This force becomes a spiritual perception of the animal's inner state. And you might even experience an image experienced as a shining in your field of vision. And this shining picture is the so-called astral embodiment of the state of being you have observed in this animal that had its desire fulfilled. And then lastly, of course, is again the Rakshal. Take a few minutes each day to review the events of your day in reverse order. View yourself from an objective, higher perspective, growing through your day backwards. What do you see? What are you shown? What do you learn about yourself? This is a way to strengthen many things, including mental picturing, memory, empathy, and self-knowledge. That's it.